Now, I can do one of two things. I can either start spending 100 hours a week trying to find what are the new and emerging opportunities, or I can find someone like Intelligent Investor who's got a track record of doing the work for me. Intelligent Investor's it's my turbocharger.
Hello, I'm Tony Kay. I'm the editor of Eureka Report, and today I'm talking financial planning with Carol Torfik, one of our financial advice commentators. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Carol, I wanted to talk today about investment and wealth management for people in their 30s. And as part of a series we're going to do just on different age bands. And looking at people in their 30s, I just wanted to talk about, the considerations that people should be thinking about in that age band.
Yeah, I think it's a great time for anybody to be thinking about their money in their 30s. I think one of the main benefits that people have at that time is the value of time. We so often leave these decisions about money and our superannuation and so on till much later on. But for anyone who's able to bring that decision making forward and make some investment decisions in their 30s, they'd be making some real massive headway by doing that. So I think it's a really exciting time to be investing and doing those sorts of things.
You've got time on your side, haven't you?
Yeah,
when you're at that age.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the benefit of compound interest and even just small incremental investments or small incremental decisions that you make at that age can have a remarkable effect over time. So I think even though perhaps in your 30s you're busy thinking about lots of other things, seeing the evidence of what can be achieved by even small changes in your decision making or small investments early on can be really quite exciting.
I suppose a lot of people in that age group, part of the consideration is saving for a house. Young children may be on the scene, so there's considerations around them as well. So is a part of it allocating, what money you have into different types of assets that you want to invest in?
Yeah, I think that's quite a common question that comes up is, look, I'm saving for a deposit or I'm putting money on the mortgage, isn't that all I should be doing at this age? And I think that's a fantastic strategy, and for most people that will be the core strategy. In some cases it could be worth considering not only investing in the home and putting any surplus funds towards the mortgage, but also considering some investment outside of the mortgage. Perhaps many years ago it wasn't as compelling to do that when interest rates were quite high, but I suppose now with interest rates being fairly low, with those that have an appetite to take a little bit more investment risk, it could be a viable strategy to have some separate growth type of investment alongside the contribution to the mortgage, which can go towards, other lifestyle expenses down the track. I think one of the other things also, which is a decision that is made separate to what is happening in the mortgage, is the superannuation question. So I think, of course, it can be probably difficult for some to justify contribution to super in their 30s, given the preservation and the time until you are able to access the superannuation funds. But even the decision around how your super is actually invested, thinking about that much earlier, perhaps in the 20s or the 30s, can have a real impact over time. So a separate decision to the mortgage, but the way that your superannuation is actually invested in terms of the asset mix inside, that decision in itself can have a sort of remarkable compounding effect over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that someone in their 30s should be looking at a more growth-oriented investment strategy?
I think, of course, it depends on every individual's feeling towards risk and how they feel about ups and downs and their tolerance to volatility in the market. But the reality is you will have, 30 odd years at that age until you can access superannuation. So by default, you have a long-term investment time horizon. So for many, taking a more growth-oriented approach does work out to be appropriate early on because there is plenty of time to ride out all of those ups and downs, bearing in mind, of course, your own tolerance to that sort of volatility. But certainly in taking on more risk, typically you should be able to expect a higher return over time. So even a 1 or 2% higher return as a result of taking a more growth-oriented approach can really have a marked impact over time. In some cases, a surprisingly substantial impact over time.
Yeah, because when you're compounding your returns, and particularly in the case of the Australian market, getting dividend returns that are tax effective, over time that can be quite compelling.
Oh, it is, yeah, and there is some good online tools and things like that that can perhaps show you the impact over time. But yes, certainly the effect of compounding returns is really quite magic actually when you look at it and the effect that it has.
Yeah, so there's some of the investment strategies that people can think about in their 30s. I also wanted to touch on estate planning strategies in terms of things like insurance, what people may want to consider.
Yeah, sure. I think insurance as well, is certainly one of those things that when you're young, you're feeling fit and well, covering yourself, for illness or injuries, just not something that you think about, which I think is quite natural when you're that age. Certainly, however, if you consider your situation and ask yourself, if I was no longer able to earn income or if I was no longer around, would the people around me suffer or would I potentially suffer as a result of not having income? If the answer to that is yes, then thinking about insurance should certainly be front of mind. Importantly, I think looking to establish insurances in your 30s is important and beneficial because often it's well before, you might have had, back problems or things like that which could impact your insurance cover if you apply when you're older. So there's great benefit to applying when you're a little bit younger, perhaps in your 30s or even your 20s, of course, in terms of getting cover without some of those exclusions perhaps that the insurance company might attach if you've had various health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, the older we get, the more things get added to the list.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, things like back issues are really common issues in terms of exclusions or loadings that apply on insurance policies. Mental health also is one of those issues that can, later sort of attach itself to your insurances. So certainly, there is benefit to getting insurance early from a cost perspective, but also, as we say, potentially before other health issues come to play.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a suite of insurance products under these: your life insurance, your total and permanent disability insurance, and then your income protection insurance. They're all pretty much in the mix in terms of what people should be looking at.
There is also a critical illness policy or trauma, as it's commonly called. And again, not everyone will necessarily need the entire suite of insurances that exist, but often, depending on circumstances, there's a combination of those which will give you the peace of mind that you're reasonably well covered if, unfortunately there was, illness or injury that you were facing.
Oh, good, Carol. So we've talked about investment strategies, we've talked about estate planning, wealth protection, a lot of things for people to consider in their 30s, but there's plenty of scope there for people in terms of building their wealth, over time to reap the rewards in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for coming in today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Please join us again next time. I'm Tony Calm, the editor of Eureka Report.